Hello and welcome to this segment of Meet a Columban. I'm Fr Jim Mulroney and I am your host, and my guest today is Jao Resari. She's a Columban Lay Missionary, comes from the Philippines, brought up in Manila, and today she is working in Taiwan. Now, Jao first joined the Columbans back in 2005, and after a few months of orientation in Manila, she was sent to Taiwan. And during that time, she's mostly been working as a volunteer and assistant, helping with the care of AIDS and HIV patients. She volunteered at an organization called Harmony Home, which has places in both Taiwan and in China, and most recently has been working for the local diocese in advocacy work and their programs regarding the support of people with HIV and AIDS. So welcome to this episode of Meet a Columban, Jao.
Thank you.
It's great to see you and great to be talking to you again.
Thank you, Father Jim.
You're most welcome. Could we begin a little bit by telling us about the type of work you're doing with the local diocese?
Right. So I started working in the diocese in 2012 when I asked for the support from the diocese, from Bishop Lee, to establish an office called Agape Center. And this office is a way to coordinate the HIV and AIDS education campaign to raise awareness among communities, especially most vulnerable communities like the migrants and immigrant communities in the diocese and the youth, for awareness at the same time for HIV prevention. Because here in Taiwan, stigma and discrimination still exists. And the bishop acknowledges that and sees the importance of the church being involved in contributing to this ministry. So that's when we started, and that ran for 2 years, establishing networks and collaborations with other ministries in the diocese and NGOs to be able to reach out to people who can benefit from education about HIV and AIDS, as well as promote awareness so that we can fight or lessen the discrimination that existed in the society. And
now, apart from your work, one of the things that you are is a wonderful artist, and you've done paintings with oil on canvas. You've done charcoal sketching, and understandably, because this is the area that you work in, a lot of your painting is about the suffering of people who are suffering from AIDS or HIV, or contracted AIDS or HIV, and also about the stigma they hope and that they have and carry, and the challenge of bringing some hope or inspiring some hope into their lives. And one of your very beautiful paintings here, it shows a mother with a young child, and you called it Dreaming for Happiness Together. And a lot of your paintings pick up this theme that you move towards happiness, or you move towards salvation, not individually, but together. And then you have another one, which has the interesting title of Pure Dialogue. And this one shows a man who is obviously quite emaciated. He's got colourful tattoos on his chest, but the bones and veins on his neck are sticking out. You can see his cheekbones coming through or pushing the skin out. The way he's holding his mouth is a posture that indicates that he's suffering, and his eyes are closed. But the person caring for him looks to be quite fit and healthy and strong. He's got big arms, and you have the contrast here of the extremely weak and the strong. Could you talk to the dynamic of what a person who is strong can contribute to a person whose life is physically weak or maybe emotionally weak? And what inspired you to do this painting?
Right. To give you a brief background, the patient there, his name is Ashang, and he suffered through an overdose of drugs, and actually he died. But then he was saved when he was brought to the hospital. But the impact of that incident was that he became in vegetative state, so he had to be brought to the shelter. And at that time, of course, he's one of the patients who need 24-hour care. And our staff and volunteers, and one of them is the one in the image, he has spent time with them and going beyond his usual task of cleaning them up or washing or cleaning their wounds and feeding them. He also finds the time to make himself or his presence known to Ashang by simple gestures of touch or talking to them. And that's how we did it in the shelter. And what inspired me in painting that moment when he was touching Ashang was, you mentioned about strength. For me, strength, the way I saw it in that moment, was not about being physically strong. He was showing to me that he has this ability to communicate to somebody who cannot communicate through words, or can do it by actions himself. So, but we were very much aware that the patients like Ashang has a sense of consciousness, that touch actually can translate to them not being alone. So when I painted that, and the title I put there is Pure Dialogue, what was going through my mind was when we talk about dialogue, it goes beyond words, and it goes beyond rational or the norm of how we communicate. Just a simple touch actually can convey a lot, especially for someone who is living in that state wherein he cannot see, he cannot communicate, but in a way, we really believe that these gestures, very gentle gestures or subtle gestures, help them or console them and make them feel that they're not alone.
I think the gentility of the gesture is something which you've painted with great sensitivity. And I understand the type of communication that you're talking about. And you have another work here which is done in charcoal. It's something which maybe has a happier ending, but it's also about the sensation of touch, where there's a man who is blind, but the sensation of touch and of guidance. In the name of the painting, you said, bring sight to the eyes. I can see, I was blind, but I can see because of you, because you will guide me. And most importantly, I can trust you.
Yes.
Now, I think when you're talking about the sensation of touch, there's a trust being engendered. Would that be something that you're trying to communicate?
Definitely. This beautiful moment that I was able to capture, I had the privilege to witness it, was with these two became friends in the shelter. Xiao Peng, he became blind because he was delayed in receiving the ARV treatment. So because of complications, he lost his eyesight. So it took him some time to adjust to that. And he became dependent on others to guide him where to go and all that. But Ajong, the one who's holding his hand, he was the one who will always be there for him. He's also sheltered in Harmony Home. So both of them are residents actually, but they found friendship during those times when Ajong will bring him out to buy some food or just accompany him. And when you mention trust, that is something that is very difficult to achieve in this community, because that's why it's very sacred in a sense when somebody gives that to another person, because in their experience, they have experienced being rejected or being ignored or being shamed actually. But when Xiaopeng and some of other residents start opening up to somebody else and starting to learn how to trust somebody else. That for me is a truly wonderful gift, which helped them actually move forward and, you know, find some positive or light in their lives. And I was very lucky. I was able to capture that moment when they were laughing together with an inside joke. I didn't know, I don't know, but for me, it was a blessing. And I hope that people seeing that will not only see the harsh realities of this illness or this discrimination surrounding HIV, but they can also see that friendship, you know, the beauty of friendship and compassion comes out and brings hope to people, not from outside actually, but even among themselves.
Yes, that, but also the strength of the inner person, you also pay some attention to. And part of the strength of the inner person, I think, is to be able to, or be open enough or free enough to receive the kindness which is offered by others. And you have here one painting, which is also, well, not a painting, it's done in charcoal, and it's called My Wish for a Better Tomorrow. And it shows a woman alone in a posture as if not quite praying, more like dreaming. Is there a story behind this sketch?
Yes. That time, her name is Xiaojun, and we became friends while I was working in the shelter. She has a son, and that time he grew up in the shelter because after she gave birth to him, she had to go to the prison, and she was in prison for some time. But when she was released, she was able to stay in the shelter and take care of him. But along the way, she realized that she couldn't take care of her son by herself. So she made the hard decision to give him up for adoption. And during that time, it was her birthday, her 26th birthday. And we gave her a cake when we were at the hospital. I remember that. And I said to her, before you blow the candle, make a wish, you know, and then she said, and then she did like that. And I knew that the wish that she was making was not really for herself, but for her son. Because at the time she was talking about, of course, her fears and her concerns for her son, but what comes beyond that was her love for her son, and knowing that he would have a better future if he found a family who could raise him in an environment where he won't feel insecure or afraid, because she felt that her being a single mom and having to recover from her addiction, that she felt that she was limited in giving that. So out of her love for him, she decided to have him adopted.
Now, parents have aspirations and dreams for their children, but children also have dreams for themselves. And we have another oil on canvas where you have a child wishing to be free, like the wind.
Yes.
I think she's following a kite. We can't see the kite all that well on the camera, but she's just running quite freely and following some dream and almost oblivious to anything that's going on around her. Is this an emotion that you've discerned in young children or even seen in adults?
Oh, definitely, especially with the children. It always amazes me how unconditionally they can love or how resilient they are. And because the difficulty in living in the shelter for these children, you can see, is they don't have a stable sense of who their parents are. Their parents won't be there, but they would have a lot of authority figures, and they would have this sense of wanting to be touched or cared for by somebody. So they always look for that. But when this Ping Ping, her name is Ping Ping, she was also born and in the shelter and was living there for some time before she was brought back home to her mom. But during the time, whenever we go to the parks, they will just be freely enjoying, playing, with no cares at all, forgetting that, yeah, when they go back home, they don't have their mom to be with them. But for them, for a young child, as innocent as that, I always see in them that sense of positive outlook in life, regardless of what they're experiencing. And I saw that in Ping Ping and other children as well. And the way they are very much resilient in facing day after day, and actually now she's with her mom and she's doing great. She's a smart girl. So yeah, I think she's achieving her dream one day at a time. So
Yeah, there are many dreams to be achieved, and adults have dreams. People that you work with and that you volunteer among, both the volunteers have dreams, those who are sick or afflicted with some illness have dreams. And we have another quite beautiful painting, oil on canvas, and you've called it Untitled. I have given it the title Flying Free. And one of the beauties of this painting, I think, is you can look at it that way, which is the way it's meant to be. But you can look at it that way.
okay.
And you can look at it that way.
Okay.
You could be flying sideways, you'd be flying up and flying down. And the pursuit of freedom, I think, is something that it appears to me from talking to you that you've worked and spent a lot of your life trying to develop among the people that you serve and the people that you work with. What is the freedom?
Okay, that question is quite okay. What is freedom? But okay, let me put it this way. Throughout my encounters with people during my missionary life for the past 15 years, one thing that always come back to me when I reflect on them is the experience of God's presence. And what always draws me to this sense of awe, I guess, is, meeting a lot of people from different backgrounds, especially during my time in Harmony Home. I felt that the depth of God's love, is so, wide, like the abyss, like you were saying in seeing the painting. Actually, that painting represented for me that sense of getting to know God is like being in the abyss of the deep waters. And that's how much I felt how overwhelming God's love is for us and for his creation. And I experienced that in simple or in small or subtle moments whenever I encounter people, and when they open up or when they get to know them. And looking back at those moments or encounters, I would think how amazing God's love is, because it takes away the boundaries, regardless of what language or culture or personal boundaries as well of my own prejudices. When we go through life being aware of God's presence in our relationships or in people, you would be amazed how how infinitely powerful God's love is. I don't know how, but that's how the painting was. I was trying to explain, like, you can go as deep as you can, but nothing can take that away, how God's presence is present within and around us. So that was what I was trying to convey in that painting.
Now, you've described in the past your journey to Taiwan as being a voyage into a world not dreamed of. But nevertheless, when you left Manila to go to Taiwan, you did have a dream, and you'd held that dream for a few years, even before you joined the Columbans. So could you tell us briefly how you came to meet the Columbans and came to decide to join them?
Sure. Okay. When I graduated in college, and I remembered I was looking for a job, and in my mind, it came to a point where I was praying to God and saying, Lord, guide me into a job or a task that would be meaningful, that would give meaning to my life. I didn't want to waste my life. I felt that time my life was too short, you know, and I don't want to end up in a desk job and just doing things because of practical reasons of income and all that. But of course, that's important. But in my mind, I said that God could guide me into doing something that would give meaning or purpose in my life. So I was discerning, and it was in my prayers that it came to a point where I felt frustrated because I was looking for signs and trying to figure out, Lord, what do you really want me to do? You know, and I'll do anything. That was my mindset. And there was one Sunday which I still remember very clearly, when my family and I were driving, and all of a sudden my dad said, "Oh, we should go to this church because before we go to visit our relatives, because it's Sunday and we can go to mass." And I remember that moment. I was just quiet and then praying and saying, "Lord, come on, I'm tired. Just tell me what you want me to do." And then I step out of the van. I saw this big banner in that church that we only went once, and they were promoting Columban Lay Missionaries, and at that time I felt fear of God, because I said, "Okay, Lord, are you serious? Are you sure this is what you want me to do?" Because like a direct answer to my prayer that very moment. So I was struggling during the mass. I couldn't focus, and my sister, when we were walking out of the church, she asked me all of a sudden, "Jao, do you want to get their pamphlets?" And I just nodded because I couldn't speak. I was overwhelmed with emotion, and I said, "I just got it." And then I inquired, and even though I was doubting if this is really what God wanted me to do, because in my mind it was as simple as getting me a job that is good, you know, like volunteer work and all that. But when I found out about the Columban Lay Missionaries, it's a commitment of 3 years, and it's a cross-cultural mission, that it wasn't in my scope, in my imagination, that this is something that I can do. And that's when I got to know about the Columbans, and yeah, that's it.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history, you can say.
But I think you spend a lot of your time wondering about what is on people's minds. And you've painted a self-portrait which shows you with the brush in your left hand. You are left-handed, aren't you?
Yes, I'm left-handed.
You are left-handed.
Just to correct, that's a photo. That's not a painting. I'm sorry.
That's a photo.
It is a
never
photo
mind.
of me.
But significantly, you're painting a child, and the caption that you've placed on the oil painting you do of the child is, "What's on your mind, child?" And it's a question I think that many of us ask ourselves every day about our friends, about our acquaintances. What is on your mind? And one of our searches in life is to figure that out. So thank you very much for talking with us today, Jao. It's been an absolute delight to have you on. We've been talking to Jao Resari, who was a Columban Lay missionary, working as a volunteer among people suffering from HIV and AIDS in Taiwan. So thank you, Jao, and God bless you.
Thank you, Jim.